Dr. Alan Mitchell, a revered neuroscientist with an illustrious career, stood at the precipice of uncharted scientific territory. The vast corridors of the human mind had always fascinated him, and he had committed the better part of his life unraveling its mysteries. From synapses firing like minute electrical storms to the vast networks that held a lifetime of memories, he had delved deep into the labyrinth of the human psyche. After years of relentless research, sleepless nights, and countless trials, Alan had crafted his magnum opus, the cognitron. This avant-garde device was hailed as the epitome of neuroscience advancements. In theory, it had the power to construct a bridge between two minds, a conduit allowing for an intimate exchange of memories, emotions, and experiences. The scientific community buzzed with excitement, but Alan, driven by an insatiable curiosity, decided to bypass further animal trials and take the ultimate risk. He became both the scientist and the subject, undergoing the procedure to test the cognitron on himself. He envisioned a harmonious exchange, a waltz of memories shared with another. However, as the device whirred to life and the cold metallic electrodes adhered to his temple, something felt amiss. A sensation, akin to a jolt of electricity, shot through him, causing his heart to race. Instead of the serene melding of minds he had anticipated, he felt an overpowering torrent of emotions and memories, an overwhelming cacophony that threatened to drown him. The room around him began to warp, shadows deepening, as the weight of another's consciousness collided violently with his own. As the experiment concluded and the room returned to its sterile stillness, Dr. Mitchell realized the harrowing truth. The boundaries that had once defined his individuality had been shattered. He had unlocked a Pandora's box, and the horrors lurking within were just beginning to emerge. Every time dusk gave way to the ebony shroud of night, Alan would find himself sinking into a quagmire of alien memories. It wasn't merely witnessing, it was living, breathing, and feeling another's past. The barrier between Alan and these foreign recollections was porous, and every emotion, every sensation would seep into him with an intensity that was alarmingly real. Initially, these nocturnal intrusions were benign, even quaint. He would feel the unmistakable tingling sensation of grass beneath bare feet during a summer day in the park, or hear the joyous laughter of children resonating in the air during a birthday celebration. There was the mellow hum of a lullaby, the warm embrace of a loved one, and the taste of a stolen candy. For a brief moment he believed he had tapped into the collective reservoir of humanity's cherished moments. But as days melded into weeks, the narrative began to shift ominously. The memories turned from soft hues of happiness to stark shades of terror and malevolence. He'd find himself plunged into a chase, the rapid heartbeat of the prey deafening in his ears, and then the roles would reverse, and he'd be the predator. He'd experience the chilling exhilaration that came from stalking, the perverse satisfaction as cold steel met warm flesh. He'd smell the acrid scent of fear, taste the metallic tang of blood, and revel in the cold, calculating ecstasy of the final strike. Each dawn would see Alan violently torn from these horrific reveries, gasping for breath, his sheets drenched in sweat. The weight of the malevolence he'd experienced would press down on him, making it almost impossible to differentiate between his reality and the vile acts he'd lived through each night. The once clear demarcation between Alan and these memories was blurring, and he began to dread the encroaching night, fearful of the darkness it brought with it. During the rare moments of clarity and respite, Alan meticulously catalogued the memories that didn't belong to him, compiling them in hopes of deciphering a pattern. He spent hours in the dimly lit recesses of his study, poring over newspaper clippings, crime reports, and unsolved mysteries. As he delved deeper, a singular name began to emerge with chilling frequency: Daniel Kane. Daniel Kane, known to the public as the Phantom of Shadows, had terrorized the city for almost a decade. His heinous crimes, marked by a signature macabre theatricality, had left a trail of unspeakable horror and unanswered questions. And while law enforcement had profiled him, followed leads, and even suspected a few individuals, Kane remained elusive, always one step ahead, taunting them with his audacity. Alan's heart sank as he recognized the grim reality. His groundbreaking invention had inadvertently forged a connection with this monster. Each night, as he relived Kane's twisted memories, he realized that he was not just an observer, but an unwilling participant, tethered to the very core of Kane's darkness. And yet, in this harrowing realization lay Kane's potential downfall. Alan held the very key that could end Kane's reign of terror. With a mix of dread and determination, he approached the local police precinct. He was met with a mixture of intrigue and skepticism, especially from Detective Sarah Klein, a tenacious officer with a keen intuition. She had dedicated years to the Kane case, and her eyes bore the scars of countless sleepless nights chasing dead-end leads. To her, Alan's story sounded like the ravings of a man unhinged, a fiction spun from too much stress. However, when Alan recounted specific, unnerving details, the unique scent of a perfume worn by one victim, the haunting lullaby that Kane hummed before striking, and the obscure locations of some of his earliest crimes, Klein's skepticism wavered. These were closely guarded secrets, facts that never made it to the public domain. Only the real killer would have such intimate knowledge. Staring into Alan's earnest eyes, Klein saw not just fear, but a burning determination. Together they embarked on a perilous journey, following the thread of memories in the hopes of ensnaring the city's most infamous phantom. The pursuit of Daniel Kane was not just a chase, it was a maddening descent into a world of shadows and dread. Each fresh act of violence committed by Kane reverberated through Alan like a dark symphony, echoing in the chambers of his mind. The malevolent pull of Kane's psyche grew stronger with every crime, and with it came an intoxicating blend of fear, rage, and an almost seductive thirst for violence. Alan found himself teetering on a precipice. On one side was his academic, rational self, horrified and repulsed by the barbaric acts of Kane. On the other, there lurked a burgeoning darkness, an entity forged from Kane's twisted desires and perverse pleasures. This emerging darkness whispered to Alan, urging him to embrace the chaos, to give in to the intoxicating rush of power and control. His days became a disorienting haze of blurred memories and stolen moments. He'd catch his reflection in mirrors and not recognize the man staring back, his eyes hollow, haunted by the atrocities he'd witnessed and felt. Disturbingly, Alan would sometimes awaken in unfamiliar surroundings, grim alleyways, abandoned buildings, or worse, the very crime scenes where Kane's latest victims lay. These were not mere coincidences, but eerie manifestations of the connection that tethered him to Kane. His nights were restless, tortured by dreams that danced between memories and present realities. He'd find himself running through dense forests, chasing shadows, the thrill of the hunt palpable. Then, in another moment, he'd be the prey, feeling the cold fingers of fear clutching at his heart, Kane's laughter echoing in the distance. Friends and colleagues noted the dramatic transformation in Alan. His once vibrant demeanor was replaced by a pallor of exhaustion and paranoia. He jumped at shadows, often murmured to himself, and displayed an ever-present sense of unease. While Alan's logical mind recognized the peril of his situation, the allure of Kane's world was potent. It was a daily battle, a tug-of-war for dominance and control. Alan desperately clung to his identity, but with each passing day the line dividing him from the monster he sought grew perilously thin. The very tool he'd created to bridge minds now threatened to erase his own. Detective Klein, a seasoned officer with sharp instincts, had seen her fair share of trauma and its aftermath on witnesses, victims, and even her fellow officers. But the transformation she observed in Alan was unlike anything she'd encountered before. Initially, she had been skeptical of his claims, but over time, as they worked closely together, she'd come to trust and rely on his insights. Now, that very connection that had been their asset was becoming Alan's undoing. The once coherent and driven scientist she'd first met was gradually being overshadowed by a man with sunken eyes, pallid skin, and a distant, haunted look. More than once, she had caught him mumbling to himself, his gaze lost in some terrifying memory. His hands would tremble, and there were times she noticed him flinch at sudden sounds, a man clearly on the edge. One particularly grueling evening, after hours of poring over evidence and leads, Klein found Alan staring blankly at a crime scene photo, his face a mask of torment. The room was lit only by the soft glow of a desk lamp, casting elongated shadows that flickered as she approached him. "You need to disconnect, Alan," she urged, her voice gentle yet firm. The deep lines of worry on her face became more pronounced in the dim light. "This bond, or whatever it is, It's consuming you. Alan slowly turned to face her, his eyes hollow, a mere shadow of the passionate scientist she'd first met. Sarah, every time I close my eyes, I'm there, with him, in his world, feeling what he feels, the thrill, the terror, all of it. Klein reached out, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. We'll find another way, Alan. We'll get Kane without this connection. But Alan's gaze hardened, a flicker of the old determination returning. No. Every moment we delay, he continues his spree. Every victim is on our conscience. He paused, taking a shaky breath. I need to see this through, Sarah. Capturing Kane is the only way to sever this link, to reclaim my life. Klein's heart ached for Alan, understanding his desperation, but fearing the toll it might take. Promise me, Alan, she whispered. Promise me you won't lose yourself in this chase. He met her gaze, a silent pledge passing between them in the dimly lit room. But deep down, both knew the dangerous game they were playing, and the thin line Alan tread between salvation and oblivion. The evening had an eerie quality to it, with dark, brooding clouds masking the moon and stars, casting an unsettling gloom over the city. The wind howled, carrying with it the distant rumble of thunder, setting the atmosphere for the showdown that was to unfold. Alan's footsteps echoed through the desolate streets as he made his way to the decrepit warehouse, guided only by the sinister pull of his connection to Kane. He could feel the weight of Kane's presence, a palpable darkness that beckoned him closer. Inside the warehouse, a maze of rusted machinery and dilapidated wooden crates awaited. Each shadow seemed to move. Every creak and groan of the structure felt like the very building was alive, watching. At the heart of this labyrinth, bathed in the faint light filtering through the cracked windows, stood Kane. His silhouette, barely distinguishable, seemed to blend with the shadows. Alan hesitated for a moment, his breath catching in his throat, but he pressed on, drawn to Kane like a moth to flame. As he neared, Kane's cold, piercing eyes locked onto his, a sardonic grin playing on his lips. You feel it, don't you? Kane began, his voice dripping with malevolence. The connection, the pull. We are bound by this, you and I. It's a beautiful, dark dance of souls. Alan, gritting his teeth, took a step forward, anger and determination burning in his eyes. This bond is a curse, and tonight it ends. Kane chuckled, the sound echoing through the cavernous space. Do you really think you can escape this? We are intertwined, forever linked by your own creation. The tension in the air was palpable, charged like the atmosphere before a storm. It was then that Kane whispered those chilling words. You and I, we're the same. Rejecting the claim, Alan's voice rose above the mounting wind outside. I am nothing like you. The two men lunged at each other, their movements eerily synchronized, as if the connection they shared was choreographing their every move. Punches thrown were deftly parried, each man anticipating the other's intentions. Their battle seemed less like a fight and more like a dark, twisted dance of fate. Outside, Detective Klein, having followed a hunch in Alan's last known location, approached the warehouse. The building appeared sinister, almost foreboding under the barrage of the storm. She entered cautiously, gun at the ready. The sight that greeted her was haunting. Amidst the shadows, Alan and Kane grappled, their movements reflecting each other, a dance of duality between light and darkness. The stark flashes of lightning outside momentarily illuminated their struggle, casting an eerie glow on the tableau. Klein took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had to intervene, to end this nightmarish dance and bring Kane to justice. But she also knew she had to tread carefully, for one false move could jeopardize not only her life, but Alan's very soul. The newspaper was awash with photos of the crime scenes, the warehouse, and a particularly grim mugshot of Daniel Kane. Society rejoiced as the terror that had gripped the city was finally caged. Congratulatory calls poured into the police station, with Detective Klein being hailed as a hero. The public narrative was a neat one. The monster had been captured, and peace was restored. But within the confines of his own home, Alan Mitchell was trapped in a nightmare that refused to end. Every corner of his mind felt tainted, every thought potentially not his own. The invasive weight of Kane's presence loomed, a constant oppressive shadow, Even simple everyday tasks became a mental battleground, with Alan struggling to discern his own thoughts from the intrusive echoes of Kane's twisted psyche. There were times when he'd catch himself humming a tune or craving a specific food, only to realize with chilling clarity that these were preferences of Kane. More distressing were moments when a violent thought would flit across his mind, leaving Alan shaken and questioning his very identity. Sleep, which used to be his refuge, became a dreaded ordeal. Nightmares plagued him, vivid replays of Kane's heinous acts, only now they were interwoven with fragments of Alan's own memories, creating a macabre tapestry of horror. Waking up provided no relief, as the line between dream and reality grew increasingly blurred. Seeking solace, Alan turned to therapy. Dr. Eleanor Hayes, a renowned neurologist and psychiatrist, took on his unique case. Their sessions were intense, with Alan often being reduced to tears, grappling with the duality inside him. "It's like I'm drowning, Dr. Hayes," Alan would often say, his voice tinged with desperation. "Drowning in a sea of thoughts and memories that aren't mine. I don't know where he ends, and I begin." Dr. Hayes, ever the pillar of calm, would respond, "Alan, our minds are complex entities. They're resilient and adaptable. We need to find a way to disentangle this web, to set boundaries and reclaim what's yours." Through a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy, meditation, and neural exercises, Dr. Hayes and Alan embarked on a painstaking journey to reclaim his mind. Each day was a small battle, a step toward regaining control. In time, Alan began to notice a shift. The once overwhelming presence of Kane started to recede, becoming a fainter echo with each passing day. It wasn't a complete purge. Traces of Kane remained, lurking in the recesses of his mind. But Alan was learning to compartmentalize, to lock away the dark fragments and focus on his own authentic self. Months turned into years. The ordeal had changed Alan irrevocably. The once ambitious scientist now led a quieter life, focusing on healing and understanding the intricacies of the human mind. His experience served as a stark reminder of the dangers of treading too far into the unknown, of playing God with the delicate fabric of the human psyche. The experiment had aimed to bridge minds, but for Alan, it became a lesson in the importance of boundaries, of understanding that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed again.